printed off the sheets and I said, okay, guys, you're going to listen. And in 15 minutes, according to Josh, we're all going to learn the book of John. And as we drove up to the Twin Cities, which is about an hour, all 5 of us, my 4 boys and myself, we all learned the entire book of John.
My name's Josh, this is Bible Memory Goal, and today I'm joined by Esther Yunkin. She reached out to me a few weeks ago to explain how she had used our memory resource for memorizing the outline of the Gospel of John that I did with Dr. Larry Denkins last year to not only teach her children the entire outline of John in a single drive when she was in Minnesota, but also bring this to her church and teach children in the Sunday school, and how she did that, how she even personalized the images to make it useful for her context and with her kids. But before we dive into this conversation, I want to remind you that the book Memorize What Matters is available not only in English as an ebook, paperback, and an audiobook, but it's also now available in Spanish. We've had it translated and it's available in all 3 formats as well. So if you have somebody in your life who is a Spanish speaker that would benefit from learning these methods, you can share with them this URL in Spanish. All right, let's first start talking with Esther about how she approached and why she approached her church about this John outline.
I'm on the Christian Education Board and I lead Wednesday nights. And so I heard your podcast. It came out, I want to say like midsummer. And so I heard it and then I played it in the van for my kids. I printed off the sheets and I said, okay, guys, you're going to listen. And in 15 minutes, according to Josh, we're all going to learn the book of John. And they're like, do we have to? I'm like, yes, we have to. And I honestly hadn't listened to the full episode yet because as you started talking, I was just listening and I'm like, I need the visuals for this. So this was my first time listening too in the van. And as we drove up to the Twin Cities, which is about an hour, all 5 of us, my 4 boys and myself, we all learned the entire book of John. And I mean, the overview of the chapters.
The outline.
Yeah. And that was so cool for me. I was like, my kids are very biblically literate. They know tons of verses. We've been memorizing since they were, in the womb. And but the fact that they could learn that entire outline, and then by the time we got home, they could repeat it back to me without, or maybe with looking at the pictures. And so when the Christian Education Board was meeting to talk about the fall, I thought, instead of like piecemealing, which I feel like our curriculum that we use, it does kind of piecemeal the biblical memory. I was like, what do you guys think about trying this? And they looked at it and they're like, sure, let's try it for a year. One of the members of our board is a teacher and she's like, you know what? That's what a lot of elementary schools are going towards, is kind of those visual cues for memory. So she was totally on board and everybody else was like, well, let's try it. And so that's how it started. It wasn't really to fit a problem. It was because I was excited that kids are learning so fast. And then still your episode about biblical illiteracy, it's always there in the back of my mind. Like, I want the kids in my church to know the Bible and to know Jesus. So how can I help them do that?
Yeah. And by the way, for those who are listening or watching, I'll link to both the John outline information as well as the interview that you were talking about with a professor at, I think it was Abilene Christian University, who was talking about the number of students that he sees come in to Abilene Christian University who have grown up as Christians and still are surprisingly illiterate when it comes to things that we would, as maybe older adults, think that, oh, everybody should know the parable of the prodigal son, or, like all of these type of things that maybe weren't as intuitive as he thought. So what I'm curious about is you approach this, like how would this work within the church? Like, are you guys, you said it was for a year, but I mean, it sounds like this is something that you can do in 15 minutes. So how are you incorporating this into what you're doing with the kids?
I was not sure at the beginning. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, or just kind of just try. And so I put everything on, a slide deck. And my initial thought was, week 1, I'm going to tell the kids what we're going to do, that over the course of the school year, they're going to learn about the book of John. And as I started pushing, the next slide, the kids were so into it. And so we ended up going through all 21 chapters. I just gave them a little snippet about each one. And then our pastor walked through, and I had pre-planned this. I was like, can you please tell them about chapter 1? Because it's got Greek in it in the picture. And I've got 3-year-olds. I mean, my group is from 3-year-old to 3rd grade. They don't read Greek. Some of them don't even read English. And so he explained the number 1 and how, the word became flesh and the Greek and God and all of that. And so the kids were hooked from the very first week. And then I apologized to the teachers. I'm like, I wasn't planning on taking, that much time this week because I do the big, beginning, and then they split off and go to their smaller classes. But the teachers weren't mad. They're like, that was really cool.
Okay, cool. Neat. So this would happen on a Sunday morning, and the way it sounds like is you get all together as a group, and then you're, kind of walking through the book of John, and it sounds like you're maybe even going chapter by chapter each week, but you did a whole overview at the beginning, and then they split out into groups after that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so our curriculum this year was on the heart of God. And so every week they were learning something about God. So this John was separate. And it was just in the opening when I was working with the kids, and we would go, chapter by chapter. At the beginning, we really worked on one chapter at a time, but they always wanted more. So, week 2, I was planning on doing just chapter 1, and then the kids wanted, well, let's do more. And you always have some more outspoken kids, and I don't know if all the kids wanted to go through all 21 chapters, but we ended up doing it every single week. And towards the end of the year, I think we could get through all 21 chapters in like 5 minutes. The kids would raise their hand. I would put the next picture up on the screen, and then the kids would raise their hand, whoever knew what was in that chapter. And they loved it. Yeah.
So then at the end of the day, like at the end of all this, the kids are able to walk through the entire book of John. Like how are they doing that?
Every single kid. We have probably 30 3-year-olds to 3rd grade, and every single kid by the end of the year could tell. And they didn't all want to, raise their hand and be on display for everybody, but they all knew it. And I was hearing from parents, like, they know all of these. Like, wow. 2-year-olds who would come with a brother, like, even he would know some of it. And they could all tell you. And I have to say, I did change a couple of the pictures because they were confusing to the kids. But by the end of the year, the kids knew it.
And I wanted to ask you about that because you sent me the slide deck for what you did. And for those who are listening on the podcast, maybe you can jump over to the YouTube channel and see this because I'm going to show a couple of the slides that you did change around. And I love that. I actually have people that like email me and ask me, hey, can I love this resource that you made. Do you mind if I change the image to do it? Of course. Like I want you, like the part of memory is personalization. Because there are certain ways that I would create. This is why like teaching the mind palace is so difficult, because my mind palace and what's familiar to me is going to be different than it is to you. And then what's an image that's sticky for me, that's memorable for me, might not be the same for you. And I love the fact that you took and changed some of the images. So do you mind walking us through some of the images that you changed and why? What were you thinking about and what made it more memorable for your kids?
Yeah, the first one I changed was chapter 5 because on the original it's 5 pillars. And the kids had no reference for that. And then when I would say 5 pillars, then I would have to try to explain what happened there. And I was like, this is just silly. I need to figure out how to make it more simple. So I worked with AI. Now this is, 9 months ago. So AI generation has come so far in those 9 months. But at the time, I asked it probably 20 times, make a 5 or make a bed in the image of a 5 and put a pillow on it. And finally I gave up with the bed and I was like, just put a pillow on top of a 5 and make an Old Testament character holding this 5. And the kids immediately resonated with that. And then from, the littlest ones, they'd be like, Jesus said, take up your bed and walk. Like, that's what they knew for chapter 5. So it started with 5, and then I actually added a couple graphics before that when I was doing it with my kids. Like number 6 is a 6 walking on water, and I put a loaf of bread and a fish in the six's
Yes.
hand so that we got both stories. Um,
Yeah.
our pastor, when he's teaching on chapter 9, he talks about Jesus made spit mud. So I made a mud puddle at the bottom of the 9. So some of these are
Yeah.
not really changing the originals, they're just adding a little bit to it. But I tell you, that spit mud, that all the kids, like that's what they want to say. Jesus made spit mud. And then the blind man could
Exactly.
see.
For me, 7, one of the things that I liked about seeing this is that, and this is true for a lot of cases where what maybe you pull out of a chapter as like, hey, this is what I really want to hold on to for this chapter, maybe a little bit different than what I pull out. And in this case, you had really kind of honed in on chapter 7. If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. And I really like that. It's like that. Okay, that is what you wanted your kids to really take from that. And then you created an image. Do you want to explain this image real quick?
Yeah, so anybody who's just listening, there's a Bible as the top of the 7, and then the angle of the 7, the stem, I tried to make a river of hearts coming down and coming into a cup, representing that Jesus is living water. And because the original 7, there's a 7 and it says feasts, but again, not all my kids can read English, and then the 7 has a line in it, and they're like, that's not how you write a 7. I'm like, okay, I don't want to have this argument every time. So I had to
Yes.
find something in chapter 7 that was a little bit more visual that I didn't have to argue
Yeah.
with the kids about. So this worked really well.
Yeah. And I would bet that even that whole process of arguing with them and then coming up with a new image, like that made it even more memorable for the kids because now they had ownership a little bit into the, hey, we didn't like that image. That 7 didn't look like a 7. You create a better image, and then you did, and I would bet that all of them are really, really, they know that 7 really well. That's really cool. I'm trying to think if there are any, that was the only ones that I saw different. Oh no, there was the 19, the 9 for 19. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, 19. So the 1 is a cross, and then the 9, I put a sad woman. I tried that one. I also worked with AI to try to get something, and I think it works that there's a woman crying or very sad next to the cross, and yeah, it
Yeah.
helps. And then number 12, I also changed.
Oh yeah. Tell me about that.
Yep. So 12, I added Palm Sunday. So the 1, it's a donkey with Jesus riding on it. It really doesn't work with the 1. Jesus and the donkey are in front of the 1, but it's there. And then
Yeah.
the 2, you had hair originally, and I just played
Yeah.
with AI to make a prettier lock of
Prettier
hair.
hair. It sounds like such a lady thing to do. Like I was like, yeah, it looks like hair, but okay. That's really cool. That's really cool. Well, again, for those who are listening, if you wanted to see the different changes that Esther and her team made with using AI, one, I think it's really cool that you have used AI to do that. I've been, last month I talked a lot about AI in the process of Bible memory, and I think this is a great, great use case for AI, is creating these images, especially when we're using those images to teach kids because they are extremely visual. And I am so encouraged by the fact that this group of kids at a church in Minnesota have memorized the whole book, or at least the outline of John, using a lot of these images. And yeah, I like if you were to be talking to somebody else who is at a church, maybe they are a Sunday school teacher, or maybe they have influence in some way. Like, what is it that really made this work for you guys? And would you have any advice to somebody that's wanting to try something, trying to promote memorization in some way within their church?
I think one of the things, like I said at the beginning, just try it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You learn a little bit more about the Bible and you learn more about Jesus. Every chapter in John is about Jesus. And so there's no way to fail. Like, you can be confident in that. And then make it work for you. I feel like if you're going to succeed in anything, you have to figure out how to make it work for you. And that is a recurring theme on your podcast, which I appreciate because every single person is individual. And when you're teaching, you have to make it work for you as well as the group. But I think a lot of Sunday school teachers and leaders are pretty good about watching for when the light bulbs are turning on and what's working with their kids. And you know if they're getting tired. So maybe you just start learning, one chapter. At the beginning, I figured we have more than 21 weeks in the school year, so we'll do one a week. It ended up to be, we did all 21 chapters every single Wednesday at the beginning. And I just calculated that into my time. But it wasn't the original plan. I adapted the plan in response to how the kids were responding and how they were learning and what they were enjoying. In a typical school year, we do not memorize a ton. We have a lot of kids who don't come every single week. So for one verse, it's usually maybe 4 to 6 weeks. But doing it this way, I got in a lot more memory because it is just like silly ones. When chapter 11 comes on and it's, the picture of Lazarus, the two mummified ones, one of our Sunday school 5th graders, he's like, that's my favorite verse. He stinketh. It's in the King James Bible. You have to read it in King James. He stinketh. Like, yes. So on Sundays, we would talk about he stinketh. On Wednesdays, we would talk about how that also has the shortest verse. And Jesus wept. And we talk about what weeping is and that it's okay to be sad when somebody dies, even though we know they're going to heaven and we know there's eternal life. It's okay to be sad. So I just loved those quick ways to get not only more scripture in, Jesus wept. Everybody should know the shortest verse of the Bible, but also the truth of what is weeping and why does it matter that Jesus wept. So I feel like the kids, not only did they learn the John outline, but they learned more verses than we typically do because I could just slide them into part of the outline.
Yeah. To me, it sounds like the outline served as almost like a peg for, hey, this image is a peg for this chapter. And then we can hang some additional verses on here that may have felt really out of place or just random without that peg that kind of brings it all together and says, hey, this now makes sense because we're seeing this within the context of the entire outline of the Gospel of John. That is so cool. Esther, I'm grateful that you even just shared this story with me. And you know what I'm also grateful for is the fact that I can take very little credit for this at all because these aren't even, this is something that Dr. Larry Denkins shared with me that I then shared with the group. So it's not even mine. I just get to enjoy the fact that putting it on this platform allowed people to find it and then use it in such a way. Esther, I know that you have your own podcast, and I want to give you just a quick opportunity. Would you introduce what you talk about on your podcast and where people can find that?
Yeah, my podcast is called Health with Hashimoto's, and it's on all of the podcast platforms. And I help women and men who have autoimmune thyroid problems figure out their root causes. And I've heard from so many listeners that they're grateful for somebody who is a Christian in the holistic health space, because that space is so crowded with new age stuff and woo. And that's not me. So I've heard from so many listeners, not only can they learn about their health and they're making, a big difference from what they hear on my podcast, but it's coming from a Christian, and people really appreciate that.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Esther. I will have links to her website and her podcast in the description below this video. Remember, if you want to grab the English version of this book, you can go to memorizewhatmatters.com, and we also have the Spanish version now available, memorizewhatmatters.com/Spanish, and you can share that with anybody in your life who is a Spanish speaker. Thank you for joining me. Watch this video next, or you can watch this one that YouTube thinks you would like. God bless. May you continue to memorize more of what matters.